Stuart Dynasty immediately succeeded in the Tudors, and the period witnessed some of the most monumentally tangible times in British history: civil war, rebellion, the beheading of the king, plague outbreaks, the Great Fire of London, and the successful foreign invasion, and 7 monarchs of Britain. How much do you know about the Stuarts? There were 7 Stuart monarchs of Britain: James VI as the first, Charles the First, Charles the Second, James the Second and Seventh, William III and Second, Mary II, and Anne. 2 Lord Protectors interrupted this dynasty line in the middle of the 17th century: Oliver Cromwell, followed by his son Richard.
The road to the throne of England. James was the King of Scotland until 1603, when he became the first Stuart King of England. He was born on the 19th June 1566 in Edinburgh Castle. In 1576, James became Monument ruler, although he did not actually take control until 1881. In 1856, James and Elizabeth I became allies under the Treaty of Berwick. In March of 1603, Elizabeth died and James became King of England and Ireland in a remarkably smooth transition of power. He continued to reign in all 3 kingdoms for 22 years.
A life of poverty. Majority of people during the era of Stuart Britain were poor, with the larger person living the terrible poverty. The 16th century witnessed a surge in population, which had a negative impact on living standards and led to an increase in poverty and hunger. Indeed, poverty was such a problem during the early modern period, which was roughly from the mid-15th century to the mid-18th century, that poor laws were instituted. Battle of the sexes. Within domestic sphere, there were clearly defined roles for the sexes, and sexual inequality was generally regarded as perfectly natural. Women were bound to obey their fathers and brothers, and then their husbands and then their sons. A wife was entrusted with the running of the household, the preparation of the food, and the raising of children. A woman could still marry as if she were wealth or if she chose to live a life to stability. Women tend to find employment not only as soldiers but also as wage nurses, while particularly skilled women persons midwifery. Trade. During the Stuart period, some exotic fruits and beverages began to make their way into Britain. Instead of being confined to local and sometimes European trade, Stuart Britain were able to trade in a global marketplace, the likes of which had never been seen before. Furs from North America, tea from China, and everything in between meant that some truly fascinating new status tantalized the British police. In the 1633, bananas were sold in London for the first time, and coffee and tea became so popular that the first coffee house opened. These were seen as veritable days of political thesis and
Catholics were unhappy because King James told them that they had to be Protestants and worship God in the same way as him. If they didn't, they had to pay a lot of money or even go to prison. A small group of Catholics decided to kill King James. They put 36 barrels of gunpowder in the cellar and hid them under firewood. One of the plotters was soldier called Guy Fawkes. He was going to stay in the cellar and light the fuse to blow up the barrels. Somebody sent a letter to Lord Montague warning him not go to Parliament on the 5th November. Lord Montague showed the letter to the king. They found Guy Fawkes before he could blow up the gunpowder and would arrest him. Soldiers chased the other plotters, and the plotters were killed in the fight. Guy Fawkes was executed for treason. In 1642, the problem between Charles I and Parliament came to a head. The result was the Civil War, which began at 1642. The force involved in the Civil War were divided into royalists and supporters of the Parliament, led by Oliver Cromwell. The royalists, although known as Cavalier, had long hair. The parliamentarian, although called roundheads, instead used to cut their hair short because they believed long hair was sinful. Napoleon General Oliver Cromwell broke the royalist resistance in 1645. Charles I was executed in 1649. Monarchy was abolished and a republic with the name of Commonwealth was instituted in London. The Commonwealth religious nature had a strong influence on culture. All kinds of recreation were suppressed. On Oliver Cromwell's death in 1658, the Commonwealth collapsed and monarchy was restored on the conditions imposed by Parliament.
In the spring of 1665, an epidemic, the bubonic plague, emerged in London, England. The plague started in China and quickly spread through Europe through trade. Whole communities were wiped out and corpses littered the streets, and there was no one left to bury them. The bubonic plague was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which was transmitted by fleas that live on grass. It began in London, in the poor, overcrowded parish of St. Chalks in the Fields. The victim's skin turned black in patches and inflamed glands in the groin, combined with compulsive vomiting, swollen tongue, and splitting headache made it a horrible, agonizing killer. It was estimated that 100,000 people died in London from the Great Plague.
In 1666, the Great Fire of London. But what happened? How does it all start? Well, it all started from a bakery in Pudding Lane in the city of London, posed by a man called Thomas Farrier. It was September the 2nd. A tidy spark in the oven burned down most of London. Thomas had forgotten to put out the fire in the oven that night. Fire lasted 4 days, from September the 2nd till September the 5th. The fires were so huge were called the Great Fire of London. During that time, houses were built very close to each other and were made of wood and straw. This caused the fire to spread rapidly and easily. It is also believed that before the fire has begun, there were oil drops in London that has lasted for about 10 months, due to which the city was very dry, causing the fire to spread rapidly. When the fire broke down, many people went to St. Paul Cathedral for several. These were made of stone, but they did not realize that the roofs of the cathedral were made of wood, so even St. Paul Cathedral was burned. The fire burned a lot of buildings, around 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and even St. Paul Cathedral. More than 100,000 people were homeless.